Okay, all right. Derek, can you hear me now?
Governor, I can hear you. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. Well, we're at a different location here, so I got a different laptop. We had to learn it all over again.
Well, let's go ahead and get started, ladies and gentlemen. We're grateful for all of you who are participating in today's Economic Task Force Town Hall Zoom meeting. We also welcome those who are joining by Facebook Live. I'm Derek Miller, the President and CEO of the Salt Lake Chamber and Downtown Alliance, and serving at the Governor's request of the Utah Economic Response Task Force. And we're joined today by Governor Herbert, as well as Congressman Stewart, who will provide us a report from what's happening in Washington, D.C. We've also got a great lineup today on our topic of those who have their PPP money and what's next. How can it be spent? How can it be accounted for? And probably most pressing on everyone's minds, how can it be done in a way so that the loan can be forgiven when that time comes? But as always, we want to thank the governor for joining us and turn it to him for his welcome. Governor, go ahead.
Well, thank you, Derek, and welcome to everybody. I appreciate, as I know the people of Utah, I appreciate all the good work that you're doing and helping us to get back on track economically. I've had a couple of conversations today with two other governors, one from Louisiana, John Bell Edwards, and also the governor of Oregon, Kate Brown. And both of them, again, are indications of others around the country that say Utah really is a leader. They're doing things correctly, and they want to know how and why so they can kind of duplicate and replicate what we're doing. So again, that's a tribute to everybody that's working together in such a cohesive fashion to find solutions to a very challenging and uncertain and ever-changing environment we have with this coronavirus, and we appreciate the good work. Let me tell you a couple of things that might be of interest to you today. It's been, I guess, a little over a week last Friday night at midnight, actually 12:01 on May 1st, that we opened up the economy, so last Friday. And again, I think not everybody's joined in, but it's happening now in a gradual, incremental way as we kind of dial open the economy. And in talking to other governors, and I was on the phone call with the vice president here Monday, it does appear that we're ahead of most states. I think we've been able to slow down the spread of the coronavirus. We've been able to get to a point where we can do things more openly in the economy. And again, I'm pleased to see that we're doing things correctly and that we're leading the nation in many ways. So that's, again, a tribute to everybody's work. Let me just mention a couple of things specifically. We've gone from from red to orange. That's part of our Utah Leads Together 2.0. It's a dynamic plan. I've had governors call and want to get copies, log on to our webpage to see if they can't replicate or take some of our wisdom and utilize it in their own state. But now we're at 2.0, which takes us into orange. And I think we'll probably in a couple of weeks have the third version, 3.0 for lack of a better number or term. And that will help us prepare the way to go into yellow. I do think there are parts of the state that are very close to being yellow now. And so in 2 to 4 weeks, some of the state will get to yellow. And I think when we get the 3.0 version out with the intent of getting the entire state to yellow, that could maybe happen in the next 4 weeks. And that's way ahead of schedule. Again, that's not any kind of guarantee, but it is a goal. And I think that the data shows that we have a chance to actually have that happen. Just to give you some information, again, our utilization of our hospitals is way low, which means we are in a position now that the healthcare won't be overwhelmed if we happen to have a surge in the coronavirus. That's really been part of the main goal to get us to that place, the idea of buying PPEs, medicines, all the efforts, all this fast and furious effort we've made and we've done is to really keep us from overwhelming the healthcare system. And we're in a place right now that we can feel pretty good about that not happening. Our transmission rate today was one infected person to less than one. You get to 1-to-1, that's stabilization. That means if you have 1,000 sick, you'll replace with 1,000 more, but it's not growing. It's actually staying the same. But today we were at 1 to 0.97, so slightly less than 1. Again, if that trend continues, we clearly are getting into stabilization here in a very good way, which leads to recovery. So I feel good about that. I think the downside right now for us economically is in talking to workforce services, there's good news and bad news. The good news is the number of people applying for unemployment insurance has dropped off, so that number is now going down. The challenge we have in many instances is that with the federal addition, $600 a week to the checks, there seems to be a little less incentive for people to go out and find a job once we get this thing turned around, because they're making literally more money being on unemployment insurance than they would if they were working. And that, as you can all appreciate, takes away some of the incentive. We think that the next unemployment rate could be as high as 18%. So we're talking about Great Depression type numbers. Now, I don't believe it's going to last 12 years like the Great Depression. In fact, I think we'll have not a V-shaped recovery. We've had a very precipitous drop, as you all know. I don't think we're going to have a very similar increase. I'm not even sure it'll be a U-shaped increase. In fact, I've compared it to the Nike swoosh. If you picture a Nike swoosh, you're going to see it go on an angle more inclined, maybe about 45% incline, which maybe take us a little longer to get back to where we were, but it will show steady growth. I'm believing by the end of this, in this last quarter of 2020. And I think we can anticipate having a healthy 2021 as we continue on the road to recovery. And in a year's time, I think be back to kind of where we were at before. That remains to be seen. That's a long time to speculate, but I like the trend, and I think we're going to get through this and have recovery starting again by the end of the summer and have growth from that point forward to the end of the year. So that's kind of my report today. That's kind of a snapshot of where we are today. I feel good about what we've been able to accomplish in literally just a couple of months when you think about all that we've done and where we've come from. And we kind of all just dropped in our laps suddenly when they closed the NBA. That's the kind of the beginning when Rudy Gobert got sick, and 2 days later the NBA closes down. That's when we knew, boy, this really is a serious thing. And what can we do? We've been working 24/7, and we are in a very good place, I think, compared to the rest of the nation. And I'm very hopeful and cautiously optimistic about the future as we're starting to turn the corner. So with that, Derek, thanks for having me on.
Thank you, Governor. You mentioned in moving from red to orange, some of the important and key metrics that we look at. And one you mentioned is hospitalization usage. The other you mentioned is the transmission rate. Overall cases is another one that we look at closely. Are those the same measures? This is a question that came in, Governor, while you were speaking. Are those the same measures that will be used in making a decision from going to orange to yellow?
Yes, obviously the trends need to continue. The president has his own recommendations as far as what we should do. And I know that most of the states are trying to abide by them if they can, but not everybody is. And I think the president, certainly with the help of the vice president, the former governor, is kind of realizing that there's one size doesn't fit all across the country, and states have different cultures and demographics and probably different things that the people are willing to tolerate. So in large part, it's going to be transmission rates, and one of the key issues is hospital rates. If hospital rates stay flat like they are now, that's a good sign, because it doesn't matter how many you test or what's being done. If you're sick you're going to go to the hospital. So that's really a constant, reliable figure. And the fact that our new hospital rates are really quite low and staying steady, we might have anywhere from 10 to 12 a day on average, is a good sign that not everybody's getting sick, at least sick enough to go to the hospital. And so that's something we'll track very closely. We do get confused sometimes when we talk about the numbers of people that actually contract the coronavirus, because that keeps getting more and more. That number goes up, and people don't realize less because we're testing more. Even though the rate of that has actually gone down, where it started out around 5, we're down at 4.2% now. And that's a good sign because it's kind of dropping. And we're doing a lot more testing. We have capabilities now, and we're going to work with other like ARUP at the University of Utah. They're going to be doing the blood tests and antibodies to see if people have had it and maybe didn't know it, or if you're immune to it. There's still research going on about whether you can get it again. Truth of the matter is, Derek, there's a lot we don't know about COVID-19. And we are learning as we go. We're making mad dashes. We are grasping at things and opportunities. Everybody's pulling together from a standpoint of trying to find solutions to the problem. And it really is, I think, everybody trying to find ways to make people have better futures, better ways to not be infected, and certainly to not suffer and die. Our fatality rate, is one of the best in the nation. We're less than 1%. The nation is about 6% on average. New York is at 7.5%. So in comparison, again, that's a number. You hate to talk about people dying, but we're doing a better job of not having people die in Utah than virtually any place in the nation.
Thanks for that additional information, Governor, and we appreciate, as always, your leadership in this very delicate balance of the health imperative as well as the economic imperative. To discuss that a little bit further and to hear from one of our members of the congressional delegation, we've invited Chris Stewart to come on. We have heard from Senator Lee and Senator Romney, as well as other members of Congress like Ben McAdams last week. We're grateful for Representative Stewart to come on and share his perspective with us. Representative, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here, Derek. Thank you. It's an honor to be with you. This is a very august group, and happy to spend a few minutes with you. Happy to share some time with the governor, who I think he and his staff and the people around him have just done an outstanding job under very, very trying circumstances. And I know that Scott Anderson and others who are going to follow. I love to hear the stories of the hundreds and hundreds of business people that I've talked to, and many times they talk about their bank, and many times it's Zion's National Bank that gets brought up. And I know that those bankers, I talked to someone just yesterday, he said that his banker was working with him at 4 o'clock in the morning. And I hope, Scott, if you're on, I hope you know that a lot of us appreciate you and the other bankers in the state who have worked just really, really hard over the last 3 weeks as we've tried to implement this triple P, the program to help the small businesses and the employees. Derek, I'm going to go very quickly. There's so much to talk about this, and it would be hard to cram into 10 minutes. I don't want to take more time than you've allotted me. I would like to leave a few minutes for questions if there are some. Maybe to give this a perspective from the federal side, I happened to be in the White House the night of January 31st. It was fairly late at night. It was probably 9:30 or 10 o'clock. They're meeting with some folks, and I saw some activity going on upstairs, and I just asked them to say, hey, what's going on? It's kind of late. And they said, yeah, we're setting up the war room for the coronavirus. And that was the same day that they had announced their ban on international travel to China. And that was the first time that I thought, okay, yeah, this is going to be something different. But I got to tell you too, from the very first intelligence briefing we had on this, which was early in January, I remember leaning over to a friend of mine on the Intel committee who happens to be a doctor, Dr. Winstrip, and said, I remember MERS, I remember SARS, I remember the bird flu, I remember all of these, but this one seems a little bit different. And part of the reason we felt that way is we could see the response from China And we suspected that they weren't being honest with us. And then shortly after that, we saw they had this just a disproportionate response, where for something that they claimed on one hand was no big deal, and then the next day they locked down 11 million people in Wuhan, and 6 days later they locked down 51 million people. So I think that, there were indicators that this was something different. To give you perspective on the federal policy and federal efforts on this, the first bill that we debated for coronavirus, which was late February, we were talking about whether it would be $4 billion or $8 billion. And we're arguing back and forth. And I remember having a conversation with some reporters and saying, hey, imagine what the Army could do with $8 billion. Imagine what the Department of Justice or, Department of Education, pick an agency and give them $8 billion. That's a lot of money. And many of us were thinking, well, it has to be done, but it is a lot of money. But again, to give that perspective, 2 weeks later, not 20 years, not 2 years, 2 weeks later, we passed a bill that was 2.2 trillion, $2,200 billion. And then we went back 2 weeks ago and we added almost another 500 billion. And I don't ever call this a stimulus. I call it a rescue package. It was absolutely essential. We had to protect these businesses. If you don't protect the businesses, you can't resurrect many of them. We had to help, what is now 33 million Americans who've lost their jobs, and we're looking for the job report that'll come out on Friday, and we're it's going to be millions more. We had to do that, and we had to do social distancing. I've always supported those two things. But as we learn more about the virus and as we learn more about the other trade-offs, I do think we have to weigh them. I did an editorial last week that I think is a good example of that, and that is, let's consider those people who, as has been mentioned here with some of the hospitals, or I'm sure will be, the hospitals are empty in many cases. One of my sons is an eye surgeon. He hasn't done eye surgery in 7 weeks now. People who have delayed screenings or actual treatment for cancer. The fact that suicide prevention hotline numbers have had an 8,000% spike in some places in California and New York. The fact the UN reported last weekend that between 200,000 and 300,000 kids were going to starve to death, directly attributable to supply chain interruptions because of this economic shutdown. I mean, the list goes on, and I think that's where in the phase we're in right now is trying to thread this needle that where you protect human life and value human life and understand that some susceptible people are very, very vulnerable. But on the other hand, we can't do this forever. We simply can't. I told the White House 2 weeks ago, there's no way in the world you can shut down the economy again in the fall. It literally will destroy our economy and our future. And how can a business or an economy work? We're dealing with what is going to be a $5 trillion deficit this year. We started out with about $1 trillion. We've already added 3 trillion. We're probably going to have another 1 trillion in lack of tax revenue to the federal government because of the economy taking such a significant hit. And some people are talking about another 2, perhaps $3 trillion spending. So we're looking at minimum a $5 trillion deficit in 1 year, and potentially a $7 or $8 trillion deficit. And again, I think as business owners and people who work in the economy and in job creation, wealth creation, we have to understand the cost of that. I had a phone call earlier with Chairman Powell, Chairman of the Federal Reserve, and was expressing to him some of my concerns regarding that. Now, he and I agree on one thing, and that is our short-term goals have to be get through this pandemic, get through this economic crisis. But we also have to recognize that there are many unintended costs to that. One of them being the debt, one of them being health concerns for people who don't get treated, suicide prevention, et cetera. And I hope we can weigh and measure those costs as we set policies that move forward now. And that's, again, where we are on the federal side, trying to, in a very delicate way, value and protect life, but also understand the costs that are associated with that, including ultimately death and other health concerns for people who may not get the care that they need. Derek, I know you had 1 or 2 questions, or at least maybe you did. Is there anything that you or any of the other participants or the viewers would like to talk about before I run out of time?
We have had a couple questions come in, and thank you for that report and perspective. One of the questions that came in was with regards to the food supply chain, and we're hearing more and more about a shortage in the area of the meat supply, potentially others. You work in the intelligence community, but I know you're keeping your eye on this as well. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, again, this is a great example of unintended consequences. And by the way, thank you for not asking when I'm going to get a haircut, because this, black market haircut deal I've been looking for hasn't worked out yet. But I'm glad we can do that soon.
Later, I'm going to ask you with your long hair to play us a song on your guitar, so you're not getting totally.
Yeah, it turns out that's my incentive for cutting these meetings short. I tell people if we can come in under time, I'll play a guitar, and so far it's never happened. Look, again, I mentioned unintended consequences that we just maybe haven't considered yet. This is a stunning example of that. The fact, and being a dairyman and a rancher myself, I have real empathy and spend a lot of time with those people who support and create our food chain. The farmers, the ranchers, the cattlemen here in the state and around the country. And you have this incredible economic irony of dairymen pouring their milk out on the ground because the supply chain is just structured for a different end result than that. You've got cattlemen who are, it's actually more efficient for them to just slaughter their cattle than to take it to the market. At the same time, when you go to the store, you're limited in how much milk you can buy and how much meat you can buy. And I just think it shows the fragility and the sensitivity of our food chain. Now we can adapt to that, and our hope is that this is a short-term problem, and we'll go back to where people can eat out. We're recognizing that 40% of the meat that we consume is consumed in a restaurant, and you can see why. That's a different deal. 40 to 47% of the cheese produced is packaged in big bulk because it's eaten in restaurants or in schools. Okay, so we can adapt to that. I'll tell you though, when it comes to supply chain though, Derek, the thing I'm far more concerned about, and that we have recognized, and that is this incredible dependence on China. And it's not just for our pharmaceuticals, and it's not just for our generic drugs, it's for rare earth materials, it's for all sorts of things. And I've had an opportunity to talk with your group before, and I think I've railed on this thing. I've been talking about this for 3 or 4 years. And that is, we would never have allowed in the middle of the Cold War in 1981 to have Russia produce 97% of our pharmaceuticals. We just would not have done that. And yet we did that with China, and all to save a buck. And I think some people are really questioning, and we're really having a values judgment on, is the only goal is the efficiency of where can we produce it less cheaply, or are there other considerations that are necessary and in our interest? And I think people are beginning to have that conversation. I'm really glad that we are.
Congressman, the second question that's come through is with regards to a potential extension of the term in which the PPP loans could be spent, currently at 8 weeks, currently under discussion in Washington, D.C. in the halls of Congress to extend that to 12. What are your own personal thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think it's probably necessary. And I got to say, I'm as critical of the federal government as anyone in this job. And believe me, I see more examples of abuse or waste in the federal government than perhaps most. But we really did a pretty remarkable thing in the sense that in 5 days, maybe 6 days, we wrote a piece of legislation that was as extensive, as complicated, as deep, and as broad as anything that I will ever consider in my career in Congress. It was an incredibly complex piece of legislation. And we did it, as I said, in 5 or 6 days, passed it bipartisan. No senator opposed it, one congressman, but he's a bit of a goofball, so we'll put him aside. And then we were able to disperse this 2.2 trillion, most of it over a matter of a few weeks, to the point where we had to come back and replenish that. It was, however, not a perfect piece of legislation, and we've been able to modify some of it. And I think we're going to have to do some more. And a really easy example of that, Derek, as you said, is extending this from 8 to 12 weeks. There are other things that we probably still need to modify to improve, and probably we're going to have to replenish it again. And I would vote to replenish it, recognizing the necessity of that. But if we load this up with a bunch of stuff that I know Ms. Pelosi wants to, and I sincerely hope that she doesn't, because it's important for us to continue this help as necessary. But let's not turn it into a political football where we can't, as you said, adapt some of this legislation, make it better, and keep the funds necessary to help these, particularly the small business people who've been so impacted by this.
We do have time for one more question, and we're going to give the governor's prerogative to ask that question. Go ahead, Governor.
It's a lot of pressure.
Governor, you're still on mute.
Does that work now?
We can hear you. Go right ahead.
Okay. Congressman, thank you for your service back in Washington. We do appreciate your voice of reason back there and all that you're doing. My request to you is, when we talk about extending, Title 32 is up for, I think the extension will be up at the end of this month. Some states like Utah have been very judicious in how we utilize federal resources and the federal monies. The Title 32, as you recall, was designed to help for those states who needed to use National Guardsmen to help them. We have a big emphasis on testing, and we're gonna call out probably about 135 personnel, somewhere in that number, here in the next week to start helping with testing at some of our hot spots to keep us, again, from having a surge in our state, keep us and now code orange so we can go to code yellow. It would be helpful to us if you could convince the president to extend that deadline for a few more weeks.
Okay, Governor, we'll push on that. And I do, as I think, I do have the president's ear on some things, and I think this would be one. And it's directly attributable to coronavirus too. That Article 32 extension isn't because you're fighting fires or trying to, build a road out to some remote area. I mean, it's directly attributable to the crisis we find ourselves in right now. And by the way, Governor, the team that you have around you, and I really mean this, the leadership that you've shown, you and Spencer, I thought it was a brilliant choice asking Jeff Burton to come in and kind of lead this team. We're really grateful for you and understand that you guys have had to make some, very, very difficult decisions. I've said it about 100 times. I'm glad I'm not a governor. I'm glad I'm not the president, because you guys have to make some really tough ones, but that's an easy one. And we'll really push to get that Article 32 extension. And again, it's just a few more weeks. We could certainly do that.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Congressman, for your report, and thank you, Governor, for the state report. We want to turn our attention now to the subject of today's town hall, and specifically dealing with those questions that have arisen, specifics with regards to how PPP funds can be used, specifically how they can be used so that the loan is forgiven at the end of the term. And to help us understand that, we've invited Scott Anderson, who's the president of Zions Bank, as well as serving as the leader of the Finance Committee on the Economic Task Force. Scott, go ahead.
Good. Thanks, Derek. It's nice to be here with you today, and I want to congratulate the governor and salute him for the great job and leadership. I think that you came into the office during the Great Recession and you led us through that, and now you're leading us out of this pandemic and economic crisis we find ourselves in. And I also want to wish you, Governor, a happy birthday a day early. So we're looking forward to celebrating. And Congressman Stewart, thank you, and to you and your colleagues for all that you did to pass this CARES Act. I agree with you. It really is quite remarkable, and it's having a huge impact on the economy and on business. Let me give you some figures. When the first round of funding for the Paycheck Protection Program ended on April 16th, it had made about 1.6 million loans across this country for about $350 billion. In Utah, we made 21,257 loans for about $3.7 billion. Now, in the second round of funding, as of Friday night, 2.2 million loans have been approved for $175 billion. That means we are making more loans that are smaller loans. And in Utah, we've made 21,751 loans. So in fact, we are making more in the second round than we did in the first round for $1.7 billion. And so the average loan in this second go around is about $73,000, where in the first round, it was about $175,000. So these are loans that are impacting small business. And to give you an give you a sense of the impact, let me read you a comment that I received from a small business. She said, after getting our PPP funding, I slept through the night for the first time in weeks. With a small business where most of our employees have been here for years, we are more like family. I've been so distressed and anxious about keeping up payroll. It's my first concern. Being able to get our payroll protection application funded has allowed me to breathe. All of my staff but one has a home and family that they support with their income. The idea that they were going to need to join the fight for unemployment, be unable to pay their monthly expenses, be fighting creditors, borrowing from their recently depleted retirement, etc., was tearing me up. This PPP funding gives me the only hope that I've had in weeks, and it's paying my employees. So you can see, Congressman, this is really working, and it's having the impact that you are hoping for. But let me just remind everyone that the amount of loans that a small business can borrow under the Paycheck Protection Program is 2.5 times the average monthly payroll. And these funds can be used to cover payroll costs, and that includes salary, wages, and tips up to $100,000 annualized per employee. And so if you take that down to the 8-week period, it means the maximum during that 8-week period that should be paid per employee is $15,385. It also covers benefits for employees, including healthcare expenses, retirement contributions, and state taxes imposed on an employee payroll for such things as unemployment insurance. It also can be used to cover owner compensation. It can be used to make payments of interest on mortgage applications that were entered into prior to February 15th. It can be used to make rent payments on leases that were enforced prior to February 15th, and it can be used to make utility payments. The remarkable thing about this PPP loan is that the entire amount of it can be forgiven. The full principal amount of it and any accrued interest can be forgiven depending on how that money is spent. If it's spent on payroll costs, on interest for mortgage obligations, on rent payments, and on utilities over that 8-week period of time, then the whole amount can be forgiven. There are some constraints. 75% of the forgiven amount has to be for payroll costs, and 25% can be for non-payroll costs. We're still waiting to get more information from the Treasury Department and the SBA on how this forgiveness will take place. And we hope to have that soon, and we hope that it will include an extension of the period for which these funds can be used from 8 weeks to 3 months. But from what we know now, to get forgiveness, a borrower submits a request to their lender. They then certify that in fact these funds have been used for the eligible items, payroll, mortgage interest payments, rent payments, and utilities. And then they have to provide some documentation showing that in fact that is how the funds were used. And so we're encouraging businesses that have received this funding to prepare the certification to substantiate the request for loan forgiveness, to obtain the Form 941 for your employees, to get the state quarterly wage, unemployment insurance tax reporting forms or something equivalent to show what you paid in those areas, and to get evidence for business rent, business mortgage interest payments, and business utility payments. And then for an owner of a business or for a sole proprietor, you need to have the 2019 tax form 1040, Schedule C, that was provided at the time that the small business applied for the loan. And then it will forgive 8 of the 52 weeks of revenue coming in during 2019 for that business. And so it's really quite a remarkable program. The Treasury and the SBA have confirmed, though it hasn't come out in writing, that businesses who've obtained these funds and who have attempted to rehire employees that were laid off but will not come back because, as the governor mentioned, they are making more money on unemployment than they were making at their business, that if these employees decline the offer to return, the businesses will not have their loan forgiveness amounts reduced. And in fact, those employees that don't come back after they have received an offer in writing may lose their unemployment. Then for any amount that is not eligible for forgiveness, it will continue as a loan on its original terms, including a maturity of 2 years from the date the loan was disbursed. There'll be no payments for the first 6 months. The interest rate is 1% per year, and there's no prepayment penalty. So this is quite a remarkable loan that can, most of it, if not all of it, can be forgiven. And that which is not forgiven, you can repay it over a 2-year period of time at 1%. So it's pretty good, Derek.
It is good, and equally good as your description of how it works. So thank you for that, Scott. We also want to give some time to our friends at Eide Bailey, an accounting firm, Michelle Francis, who's a senior tax manager, and Adam Sweet, who's a principal in the National Tax Office, have joined us. And thank you both for joining us. We want to give you some time.
Thank you, Derek.
Thanks, Derek. We appreciate being here. I just wanted to make a note that Ted Hill is also a member of our group here, and he wasn't able to make it onto this call just due to the time constraints that we have. And we're tasking Adam with telling us what he knows about all this that he could talk about for 13 days in the next 13 minutes. So good luck to you, Adam. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks. I think maybe we'll cover it more from kind of a boots on the ground. We're not a bank. We didn't write the law. We didn't write the rules that are coming through, but we're certainly fielding the questions from clients about practically how does this PPP program work. So kind of I sketched out kind of 2 or 3 points I think everyone should be thinking about. I think to the first point, to Scott's point, that I think of this program as 2 different parts. There's the loan portion of the program, and then there's the forgiveness portion of the program. And there's kind of 2 sets of rules that apply, one for the loan, one for the forgiveness. And really most of our clients like the loan, but they like the forgiveness even better, obviously. That's the ultimate goal is how do we get it forgiven? So I think the first point there is that for anyone that's received a PPP loan, your date of funding, when the cash hits your bank account, that begins that 8-week period for tracking eligible expenses. So the way you demonstrate forgiveness, or the way you prove out forgiveness, is by incurring eligible expenditures. And you have to incur it during the 8-week period, beginning when that first dollar hits your bank account. So it's interesting from the Congressman and from even just reading the Wall Street Journal that there's discussion about extending that 8 weeks to 12 weeks and beyond. I think that would be very helpful, particularly given that many of our clients are still struggling to become operational at this point. And the 8-week they're 2 weeks in, let's say, and they're not even operational yet. And so they've already lost 2 weeks to incur eligible expenditures. So I think that would be a welcome addition to the program if they can bump it out to the 12 weeks. As Scott mentioned, that what I call the 75% rule has been a difficult one to administer. When you actually look at the statutory language for forgiveness, there's a bucket of expenses that can give rise to forgiveness, but there's no bias towards one or the other. There's rent, there's payroll, there's what else am I forgetting? Mortgage, utilities. But it doesn't say that one has to be in proportion to the other. It just says as long as you spend one of these 5 categories, you get forgiveness. And then the Treasury Department a couple of weeks back in an interim rule said that 75% has to go to payroll. That if you're tracking your eligible expenses during this 8-week period, 75% has to go to payroll. And that's a challenge for clients, again, clients that are not fully operational at this point. If you're a restaurant, for instance, and you have rent to pay and you have you have to pay your mortgage and you're having to pay your utilities, but 75% of your loan proceeds, if you want it forgiven, has to go to payroll, that can be a struggle. I think the response back from DC has been the purpose of the program is the Paycheck Protection Program. So that's why they want those dollars going to payroll, but it's a struggle, I think, for some people to get up to that 75% hump. I think another very popular question that we don't have an answer to at this point is just, it's a basic question even, but how do you track expenses during that 8-week period? Is it a cash basis test, meaning all you're gonna have to show when you meet with Scott or meet with your banker at the end of the 8-week period, or all you're gonna have to show is that you wrote a check, that you have a draw from your bank account, or is it more of an accrual concept? And it matters because if you think about it, if you, let's say your loan funded today, which is May 5th, and you issued a rent check on May 1st, well, technically you didn't incur that cash expenditure at the start of the loan period. You incurred it 4 days before the loan. So if it was an accrual basis test, you'd be able to accrue that rent expense over the remainder of May versus if it's a pure cash basis test, you'd lose out on that. So our hope would be it's an accrual test, but we don't know that yet. And really, we don't know much about the forgiveness at this point. That's one of the big unanswered questions here is, how does the forgiveness stage work? And we've been promised rules from the government, from DC, so hopefully we'll have rules here in the next couple of weeks. And then finally, this was kind of an unwelcomed update from the IRS last week, but the IRS told us that there's no tax deduction for your eligible expenditures that you've incurred during the 8 weeks. They are not tax deductible. And it's a bit of a surprise because Congress seemed to indicate with the CARES statutory language that there should be a tax benefit from incurring the loan and having the loan forgiven. And by losing the deduction, you kind of lose that tax benefit. So we'll see. I think there's been some bipartisan consensus up in DC that the next round of stimulus may correct that. So right now, no deduction, but let's see if we get further legislation, maybe it'll provide that the eligible expenditures are tax deductible. I think the other big question that we've been receiving, and this is a very time-sensitive question, was the original CARES Act said only that in terms of eligibility, what the CARES Act said was, you can borrow as long as you think you need it due to the economic uncertainty caused by COVID-19. It appeared to be a very broad a very vague standard, and maybe you could have even thought it was intentionally vague to encourage lots of people to borrow, that the goal is to kind of have a broad-based approach to it. There was no mention in the statute about not having another source of capital. So there was no requirement that the traditional SBA guidance would say you can only get an SBA loan if you don't have another source. If you don't have owner capital, if you don't have owner equity, if you don't have a line of credit, then you can get an SBA loan. But it seemed like that was all stripped away for purposes of the PPP. Well, much to our surprise, maybe a week and a half ago, there was an updated frequently asked questions. It's question number 31. And what the SBA and what the Treasury said was, part of the certification for receiving a loan is indeed that you're affected by COVID-19, but also part of it is that you don't have ready access to another source of capital to maintain ongoing operations. And that caught a lot of people by surprise, because there's people that have already met and borrowed money under the original rules as they understood it. They're 2 weeks in, and then this FAQ comes out and says, oh, by the way, you shouldn't have borrowed if you had access to capital from another source. And if you read that question 31, it's very vaguely defined. What is the other source? Could it be owner? What if your owners have access to other cash? What if you have a line of credit? What if the line of credit is substantially, the term, sure, you could borrow, but the interest rate is punitive? Or what if the bank requires collateralization that could impact your ongoing operations? All these questions we don't know, but it's given pause to a lot of people. And part of the reason why is in that FAQ, the SBA said that you can give your loan back by May 7th, which would be this Friday, and not pay a penalty. So we've been getting a lot of questions from clients that maybe are decently capitalized at this point. Let's say they have some money in the bank. Let's say the future isn't promised to anyone. So sure, they have enough capital for a month or two. They borrowed originally because COVID-19 could take the rest of the year, could take 2 years to get through. And so that the PPP loan would let them kind of maintain operations through. Something now they're asking is, the fact that I have cash in the bank, does that mean that I'm not eligible for the PPP loan? And frankly, we don't know. And our best advice can be is, if it makes you nervous, consider giving the money back. And again, that would be by this Friday, in the next 2 days, to do so without penalty. And then along with that, for anyone that borrowed more than $2 million, there is now going to be a mandatory audit of your loan before it's forgiven. This was another surprise that is not in the CARES Act, wasn't included in the original application for loans, but this was dropped last week as well, that if you borrowed more than $2 million as a business owner, and we actually have more than a few clients, large clients that were able to borrow that amount or more, before your loan is forgiven, you're going to have to undergo an audit. No one knows what that means exactly, but again, if that makes people nervous, if you borrowed more than 2 million and that makes you nervous, then maybe the thought is you could consider giving the money back by this Friday to avoid that.
Hey, Adam, sorry to interrupt you, but it's the 7th of May. I think it's Thursday, right?
Is that right? Yes. Okay. So I get my days mixed up. Working from home, you forget what day it is. So,
Thanks.
yeah. So it just a lot of uncertainty. I think that part about it's unfortunate. Why there was a lot of bad press about large publicly traded companies receiving PPP loans. I won't name names, but you could probably Google and find out that there were large companies and well-known borrowers that received loans. And I think the government was under pressure because of that and had to come out with a rule to try to curb what was being viewed as maybe abuse of borrowing. And unfortunately, when they came out with that rule, it swept up a bunch of other people who aren't large publicly traded companies, who aren't well-known famous brands, and introduced uncertainty to their borrowing as well. So I guess finally, I'd wrap it up with this, that with the forgiveness period, I think there's a couple of, even with this uncertainty, there's a couple of common sense things that we recommend all clients do. I think one, we recommend that you keep your loan proceeds, if you can, in a separate account to be able to track the eligible expenditures coming out of that account. I think it'll be a lot easier when it comes time to meet with your banker and to work on forgiveness, that when you can show the loan proceeds deposited into a separate account and then show the eligible expenditures coming from that account, it may just make that a lot easier. It's a little bit of optics, substantively, why should it matter if cash is fungible? But optically, it may make it easier when it comes time to apply for forgiveness. And it may just be as easy as having the separate loan account that reimburses your operating account for expenses as you go. Again, you might say substantively, what's the difference between that and just putting the money into my operating account? I agree, but optically, maybe it'll make it easier there. So that, I guess I'd leave it there. I know we're running short on time, but if I take a question, if there's a question, or turn it on to the next participant.
Adam, thank you for that important information and all those updates. Let me try to summarize maybe a question, or anticipate a question that may be going through a number of our viewers' minds at this point, and based on the details that you shared on the most recent guidance, particularly as it relates to that new guidance in the frequently asked questions. I think you said it was question number 30 or 31. But we probably have a lot of businesses out there thinking, oh my goodness, I was told to go after this loan and to go quickly and to, get it done and ask questions later. And now I'm worried that, because maybe I do have enough to get me through Q2, but my sales are plummeting. and I'm not going to be able to keep people on the way things are in Q3. And so I'm saving my Q2 money and using my PPP loan now, and plan on using that savings through the summer or the fall. I know that's a tough question, but what advice would you give to the business owner who's got that going through her mind right now?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say first, we were leading the charge back on April 3rd. You talked about everyone encouraging everyone to borrow. We were leading that charge, certainly for our clients. I mean, I think secondly, if you decide to keep the money, I mean, think about if anyone questions you in terms of need, think about how you demonstrate that. So think about what are the other sources of capital you have now? What would be the cost of using that? What has COVID-19's effect been on your sales? What do you project that effect to be kind of in the near long term? Kind of all trying to buttress the argument that sure, you may have other sources of capital, but the PPP loan was still essential to keeping you operational, for the remainder of this COVID-19 period.
Great. Thank you for that answer. And thanks to both you, Adam and Michelle, for joining us today. If it's okay, we're probably going to keep you on our speed dial so that we can get you back as more questions come in and as more information is released. In the final few minutes that we have of our town hall today, we always like to end with a business story. And for this one, we want to reach out to our friends at the Cache Valley Chamber, Jamie Andrus, who's my colleague there, to introduce her guest today. Jamie, go ahead.
Thank you, Derek. I'm excited to end on a positive note and share what I'm going to introduce as our Save Our Restaurant project. We have some really innovative and collaborative people in Cache Valley and Logan who put together an actual restaurant delivery co-op. So I've invited Greg Roper, who is from our Cache Valley Media Group, to explain how this came to be and what's happening with our restaurant delivery co-op. Greg?
Greg, you may still be on mute. Give it another try. There we go. Maybe we've got someone who's monitoring the... Greg, you're off mute, but we still can't hear you. We can see you waving. I can see on your screen that there's something that says your mute is still on, even though on our side it's been taken off.
Can you hear me now?
There we go. Turning your computer upside down worked. Good job.
You wouldn't know that we work at a technology company, would you? So I appreciate the opportunity to be able to talk to you for just a few minutes about the fantastic accomplishments up here in the north that we were able to do. Really briefly, I appreciate Jamie giving us this opportunity and the amazing job that the Chamber of Commerce with the weekly updates, sometimes daily, that they're doing has been very, very helpful. So thank you very much, Jamie. Justin Hamilton, who is a restaurateur with Cafe Sabor, who has multiple restaurants up and down the state, came to me about March 16th and said, we've worked together for, Justin, how long? Justin actually is here with me. So he came to me and said, this is not going in a direction that we like. We've got to come up with something that's going to be operational for our restaurants locally to be able to continue somehow, whether it's a 20%, a 30%, or a 40% decrease, to at least keep something going. Now, the Cache Valley Media Group has 10 radio stations, social, digital, all of the key components of pulling something together quickly. And Justin said, I've got a few restaurant owners up here who have said, we have vehicles, We have manpower. We have the ability to put into place our servers that would like to deliver food, because we know that delivering is the only way that they're going to be able to do that. I got a hold of my web team and said, can we put together a website that allows people to go to one location? I don't know how many people are going to be involved with it, but that they can go see who is delivering food from east to west and south to north here in Cache Valley. Within about 12 hours, my web developers came up with a site. We called it and named it CacheValleyRestaurantDelivery.com. We put it onto 10 different radio stations, social media. We did 2 different videos. The mayor of Logan came and did a please help, please do. We put that out there with some of the statistics that we were able to do. We didn't know if there were going to be 5, 10, or 20. We ended up, by the end of it, by Justin coming on board, 36 different restaurants being on board. Justin, which I will let him briefly explain, I did all of the let people know about it, tell them where to go find it, tell them how to get it. Justin, on the back end, with a delivery business that was a catering, along with other ones, had vehicles that obviously were sitting still. And he said, I'm going to put those vehicles to use. Some restaurants don't have delivery, some do, some. We're just going to make it possible somehow. And I honestly can't speak to how Justin on the back end of this made this work. All I know is that I got several phone calls from Justin at 11 o'clock at night, at 10:30 weekends. It was amazing to see their efforts. Over the course of the time with this website, we've been driving an average of 800 people a day to the website, going and choosing how they want their food brought to them. Justin, I can let him briefly describe how they did all of the things on the back end.
It's going to show up. So anyways, kind of what worked out with this is that originally we started with the catering business. That was kind of a branch of our restaurants. We have an offsite catering business, and that obviously went away pretty quick. So as a business owner, the number one thing you want to do is preserve jobs for your employees. That's kind of the minute this all kicked in, that's what we wanted to do. So there's obviously DoorDash and Uber Eats and Postmates and all these delivery services that exist out there. But as a business owner, if you can take care of your own employees first and foremost, that's what you want. So we quickly got a couple of insurance agents. We got a lot of these other independent restaurants going with non-owned auto policies so that they could immediately keep their servers delivering food. And there's something about a lot of these local independent restaurants that when the server that you're used to seeing in the restaurant brings the food to your front step, it's magical. And I think that's kind of the success story, is that people really rallied and started to support these restaurants and ordering. And we deliver everywhere from Clarkston up down to Hiram and anywhere in Cache Valley. And it's kind of to give you a little bit idea on numbers, we probably dispatch on weekends up to about 300, 360, some up to 400 deliveries a night is kind of what we're doing. So for a restaurant community in Logan, that's been huge. And, you know, what's the success story of that is that nationally restaurants have been, you know, it's been hard. This has been really difficult, but restaurants in Logan have been, you know, we've had a couple that have hit up to 80 to 90% of pre-COVID sales just in doing delivery and takeout. So that's what's been pretty amazing for this, is that it doesn't matter what the volume is, you're still helping. And there's been some smaller restaurants that have came on in the last, 3 weeks, and they were at the point of maybe serving 3 to 5, even 10 orders a day was a good day for them. And we've been able to double that or triple that. So when you're a small independent business and, you don't do a lot of volume, every little bit helps. So this media, working with the media and the website, is number one, driven business to these restaurants. And number two is we've kept a lot of service industry people working and making money. And that's going to be huge. Listening to the town hall, getting people back to work as restaurants is going to be our number one problem, is that, unemployment's kind of incentivize people to go there. So the more we can keep people employed in service-oriented positions right now, the better it's going to be us in this next recovery phase, because we've kept them engaged, we've kept them working. They've still been part of doing things in a safe environment, which is going to help us to rebound in the restaurant business. We took this same concept and we've tried to do it a little bit up down in St. George, where we have another location. And it's a little bigger market. It tends to work well in these smaller markets where the independents really rally together. And we also have done one up in Idaho Falls in eastern Idaho, and it's worked pretty well up there as well. So, you know, it's great to see the support. We've added a few other things to it where we did a food drive through it. So as the local food pantry one Saturday was short on food. So as we dropped your food from a restaurant, we collected canned food and delivered that back to the food pantry all one Saturday. So it's been a community effort. And I think that's the success story that's came out of this. So
Cache County is really known for taking care of its own inside of the valley. And the food drive that he mentioned, Matt Whitaker, who is the director of the food pantry up here, mentioned we've lost 3 to 4 major food drives with the Boy Scouts and other things along those lines. Demand has gone through the roof, but our supply has plummeted. And so the Cache Valley Media Group up here did a drive and drop situation, and we convinced Matt to put on a Venmo activity to be able to, or a Venmo, to be able to send funds to. And in one day, we supplied over 40,000 pounds of food and over $80,000 to the food pantry here, along with the restaurants that were involved with that. So people want to help. They just need to be given direction how to help and to do it safely. That's what we've discovered. They really want to be involved in making people's lives better.
And thank you for doing just that. Thank you, Justin. Thank you, Greg, for sharing this story with us. And thank you, Jamie, for introducing us to these 2 gentlemen that are helping their community in all kinds of ways. Thanks to all of our presenters today. And for those who have joined us on the town hall, a reminder that we have the Utah Leads Together webinar series. The next one will be Friday at 10 a.m. It will be on supply chain and logistics. You can find out more information at the website for the Salt Lake Chamber. We'll see you all again next Tuesday for our next town hall. Thanks again.